Welcome, everyone, to the Finding Elevation podcast. Joining me today is Jason Widup, who is a marketing advisor, also a consultant for software companies. He calls himself pretty new to mountaineering, but he actually has been doing it for a couple of years. And before that was a pretty serious hiker as a way to just get outside and lower his stress and overall anxiety, which we could all use a dose of. He lives in Seattle. He has 2 adult children, the youngest of which is about to go off to college this week. And through his life, he's worked through a number of surgeries on his back. One of those resulted in an artificial disc that prevented him from being active for quite a while when he was in his 30s. And now he's gotten into mountaineering, and his focus really is on learning to be more self-sufficient in the mountains in order to be able to do bigger things and more challenging things, which to me means you got bit by the mountaineering bug. That's what that means.
Yep.
So welcome, Jason. It's super fun to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to our little chat here.
Yeah. So Jason and I started working together. He started coaching with Alpine Athletics. I looked back, it was the beginning of 2023 when you were getting ready for your first attempt of Mount Rainier, which is, of course, the highest peak in Washington state. And it's also a mountain where most people cut their teeth.
Yeah.
They're try out mountaineering. And then they're like, there's something to this. I like it. I want to do more of it. It's people call it a beginner mountain. I think it's more like, you figure out if mountaineering is for you or not on that peak. So we're going to talk today about that whole, and you just summited Mount Rainier.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks. Yep.
So we'll talk about that whole progression from sort of starting new, why you wanted to climb, what you learned on those attempts of Rainier, how it's changed, what you've learned about yourself, how you take that into your life and your business, and of course about the training process as well and what you like and didn't like. So let's just get into it. What was it about Rainier or mountaineering in general that piqued your interest in the beginning?
So I was born in Seattle. So, I've been here for a long time. So I've always had Mount Rainier in my backdrop. And so, just constantly looking at that thing and just, you're so far away from it and it's so prominent, it just is it's mind blowing, and so that, that's a little bit of a part of it is just kind of, it's always been there. And actually my first kind of experience with any kind of, it wasn't mountaineering, but it was real tough backpacking, I would say. I was in the Marine Corps, and so it was during training. I don't think it was boot camp. I think it was after boot camp. It was during combat school, or I don't know, whatever, one of these things. And we had to do it. It was only 12 miles, I think. But I just remember just how arduous it was. And it was hot, because it's in California. It was dumb, and I wore my brand new boots, and I just wore 4 holes in my feet and actually had to go to the hospital for it. That's how bad it was. But I just remember getting so high up and just seeing all around me and just the accomplishment feeling, the feeling of accomplishment that I'd get getting to the end, basically. And just wow, look at what we just did, with this big, heavy Vietnam era. It felt heavy pack on, not ultralight we try and do today. So that was kind of the first bug. And then you mentioned I got laid off when not getting laid off, fired from my job, but in 2017, 2018. And I had just threw me into this really horrible anxiety and stress. And my blood pressure was 150 over 105, every day from stress. And I just was trying to figure out what I could do outside of medicine to help take care of that. And I started, and I was completely out of shape. I was not working out. I wasn't doing anything. So I started just walking around the neighborhood, and that turned into longer walks around the neighborhood. And then that turned into some local hikes, which, I live just outside of Seattle, right close to just a bunch of world-class stuff. And then I was still am, my counselor and this was right in the beginning of COVID. And he was telling me, he's what I used to do before COVID in my practice is I would take a group of my patients and we'd climb Mount Rainier. I was like, oh my God, that sounds awesome. I was like, I want to do that. Are you going to do that again? He's like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to figure out, what guide company I can use and blah, blah, blah. And time went on and he wasn't doing it. I was like, are you doing it? Are you going to do it? He's like, I don't know, And so finally I'm like, all right, I'm doing it on my own then. I'm going to climb Mount Rainier. I'm just going to take that up on my own. I'm going to do it. And so that was really what started it.
And this is 2022?
This was
the time frame?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It would have been right in probably early 2022. And then I didn't know anybody in mountaineering at all except him. But, it was therapy. So we weren't really talking about mountaineering,
Right.
but I remembered I was like, I had this guy that worked for me, Peter, at the place I got fired from. And he was on his way to doing all 7 summit. And I'd remembered that. And I was like, hey, Peter, would you want to, get together and kind of talk? And I remember asking him, we went to dinner and I was like, so where do I need to be, so that I know that I'm at least even capable of training for Rainier? Like, what do I need to what do I need to be from a hiking perspective to think, all right, maybe I can start to train for it? And he told me, I can't remember, it was something like carry 20, if you can do 25 pounds up Mount Si in a certain amount of time, he's like, then you're probably like at the starting point. And so I just was like working up to that. And I got to that point. I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do it. And then that's when I started, trying to train on my own. And I read Training for the New Alpinism book. And I started following it, but I was just kind of like, I just was not sure, am I doing any of this right? It was a great book, but I just... and it wasn't I didn't need the motivation really. I just didn't know if I was doing it right. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I want to make sure I'm doing it right, not injuring myself, that kind of stuff. And so led me to you.
And what was it about having a coach? Like, you didn't need the motivation, so you wanted to know you were doing it right. What did you take from that coaching experience, though, that you think you wouldn't have had otherwise if you kept doing it on your own?
Yeah. Well, definitely just like all the knowledge, I could ask you any question and you've got so much experience. And so just having that at my fingertips, it's like I had a professional and an expert right there that I could ask, I think. And you follow a lot of the same principles, but I'll do things differently too. You know what I mean? From the book. And so knowing that you had done it with other people and that they had succeeded, so like, what it takes. And then you're just more than just a trainer too. You know what I mean? So like you talk about the mental part of it, which is a huge piece for me. And we'll, I'm sure, get into it. That was a huge piece for me. And so I think that, and I didn't expect that part of it, but that was definitely like a huge benefit to it as well. How do I pee in a bottle? And like and what do people do in the tent? And I just these random little questions that you just would not have anybody to ask. I'm not going to go on Reddit and ask, or something. Groups on Reddit would just like shoot me down probably. So yeah, it was nice to have all that.
And all those little things add up, obviously. Also, just knowing those things and especially practicing those things make you more confident and also more efficient. And you're using less energy to do the things because you've practiced it. And they're no longer novel to you because you're like, using your example, I already peed in a bottle. I practiced doing it in my living room, like whatever it is, I know. But they make a big difference and they can be really stressful if you've not encountered it before or not even thought about it before. It's fun for me. I'm glad you brought that up because it's fun for me to share that knowledge because so many of us learned it the hard way. And I think there's still part of mountaineering that's like, you have to like earn your knocks and like figure it out the hard way. And I just don't subscribe to that at all. I think the more knowledge we could share with other people so that you have an easier time, it elevates all of us as a community. So it's fun for me to share all those tips and tricks with people.
Yeah, and it was very helpful. And I carry around a lot of anxiety. So the less I have to worry about, the better, And so I think for me, just being able to, just having answers to those questions or your perspective on it was incredibly helpful.
Cool. And then so we worked together through 2023, which was last summer, and you went to Rainier. I remember your biggest worry was ladders before you went there.
Yes, because I was reading, and I just read probably too much. Some people are like, just ignore it and just get there and do it, because like it's going to be what it is. But of course, I'm on the Rangers blog, and I'm on like the Facebook groups, and I'm just seeing everybody and they're talking about it. So I knew going in there was 4 ladders on the route already. And I knew one of them was a double or triple ladder. So I was in my head, but it ended up, I never even got to a ladder. Like that's how I didn't even make it to the first ladder. So the ladders didn't end up becoming an issue for me that time, but other things were.
Well, how did it go though? Tell us about that first trip up.
So I felt really confident. I'd say, pretty confident. I wouldn't say, I was like trying to, but I was also, you got to have a positive attitude too. So you can't go in, even if you're not all the way there. If you go in thinking you're not all the way there, like that's just going to be hard or mess it up for you. So I was confident. I was still kind of worried about some of my heart rate stuff. Like, it would still it would spike. And I had done Mir, I think the week or two before. And I was like, man, my heart rate really spiked leading up to like Pebble Creek, and which is, on the first part of it.
Which is a great training hike that those of us in Seattle got to take advantage of because you get to climb or hike on Rainier up to about 10,000 feet. So it's amazing
it's
training.
Great. You don't need a permit. You just head up there and head up. And I was doing it with RMI, who I think is great, but like for me, their approach, once I thought about it again, I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So like day one on RMI, you go up like 1,200 feet or so, I think, 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet. And you do your snow school there. So you learn how to walk on a rope and you learn how to use your crampons and self-arrest. Then you come back down. So now day one, you've now basically burned, like 1,000, 1,200 feet coming back down. Yeah. It's hot. It was really hot. It was mid-August. And I remember that day too, my heart rate spiked. So in my mind, I was already like, okay, maybe I'm not ready. And I started having some doubts. So then day two, you go up to Mir. And then that night, you basically head up for your summit attempt. And so I made it to Mir. I wouldn't say I struggled, but my heart rate was high the entire time, like in the 160s, high 160s, which, if I'm trying to do it right, it should be low 150s, 150. So then I get to Mir and I'm in my head again. I'm just like, I burned myself out. I'm not going to be ready. And it was perfect. Like, the conditions were great, no problems with weather, everything was fine, no rain, it was warm. So we get up in the middle of the night and I'd never hiked in the pitch black. So that was the first thing. I'm like, already like my heart's going. I'm just like, oh, I'm nervous. It's pitch black. I've never done this before. And so then we get going and I feel okay, but I'm looking around, we're crossing, what's that first glacier?
So you leave Ingraham Flats and you walk across.
No, this is leaving Mir. Leaving
Mir. Yeah, you're going up to Cathedral Gap.
You go up to Cathedral Gap. Yeah, you cross this glacier that's right there. I can't remember the name of it, but I see my first crevasses, and I'm looking around and it's pitch black. And when you see a crevasse in the pitch black with your light, it looks way more ominous than it might in the daylight. So I'm starting to get, I'm building up the nerves. And we get up Cathedral Gap in like our first break. And I remember it's kind of a little cloudy because it was all just and I remember I'm shivering because I'm sweating a lot because I'm probably not quite as fit as I needed to be. And I'm sweating and probably from nerves too. And I'm having a hard time eating my bar and drinking. And they're like really rushing us, So I'm like, I want a little bit of a break. And so I remember telling myself, and they're really hard on people. They're like, you can't turn around between now and the top of the Cleaver, which is another probably hour and a half, 2 hours. And so just really be honest with yourself, can you make it? Can you do it? And I remember telling myself, if anyone else turns around, I'm done. I don't feel ready. If anyone else says they're going, I'm not going to be the only one, but if anybody else says it, I'm going to go with them. And sure enough, two other people in my group were like, I'm not cut out for this. And so I basically bailed out at that point. And you got to do the walk of shame back to Camp Mir by yourself with a guide
in the dark.
And then you got to sit there. You got to wait for everybody else to go up and come back down. You're not going back down by yourself. And so I remember sitting there and just wondering what just happened. What happened? I was upset with myself. And so that was the first experience.
And looking back, so I'm a big, there's a lot of people who say, if you don't accomplish your goal exactly the way you said you're going to accomplish it, it's a failure. And I really struggle with the word failure because I think all those experiences are meant to teach us something.
Yeah.
Whether it's, I'm not cut out for mountaineering, or it's, I need to change these 3 things and come back next year smarter and more experienced. So what did you learn from the failed attempt and what did you want to tweak for the next?
Yeah, I think part of it was, all right, I've got to get more experience with some of these things that I just didn't quite have experience with. And I wanted to figure out, am I fit enough, And so I remember when we talked, I was like, all right, because I immediately signed up for the next season. I got back and literally within a couple of days, I had signed up for, doing it again the next summer. And I remember I told you, I said, I want to train so well that the fitness part is not a concern. It's the mental part is what I'm going to have to figure out. And so, but it wasn't really until 5-6 months into next set of training that I really think I realized a lot of what had happened. I was a pretty big marijuana user and I didn't bring my marijuana with me on the mountain, which was smart. You don't definitely want to do that.
And also, and not that I'm condoning that, but also part of testing everything is so that you take those same systems with you onto the mountain. You don't tweak anything. And you had made a big adjustment in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. I was used to smoking before I go to bed, help me sleep. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I don't want to take it up with me. And I think that not only, and so then I stopped using it in the beginning of this year. And I realized a lot of things that it was affecting my fitness too. And I didn't know. And so we went through and I remember my fitness, it immediately tanked. And it was so weird. I remember the first hike I went on after I stopped smoking. And it was it was a really basic one with a buddy. And I struggled so bad. My heart was racing the entire time. We were going slow. I could barely keep up with him. And just 2 weeks before that, when I was smoking, I felt like I was in much better shape. So I started doing all this research and I just kind of learned that, what effect marijuana can have on, your heart and training when you're an endurance athlete. And, your body gets used to these chemicals that can artificially reduce your heart rate. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so then when I stopped, then my body was like, wait,
I got to do this by
I'm not,
myself now.
yeah, now I got to do this by myself. And so it took, I want to say at least 2 months.
Yeah,
Probably
I think it was
two,
close to 3 months before
yeah,
your
probably
system
three.
got regulated again.
Yeah, it was probably about 3 months. And that really, I think that was a big part of the key, both mentally and physically for me. So I think that kind of hit both sides of it. And so, but then when I was kind of back, then I don't know, about a month before Rainier, I did Mount Adams, and I did that car to car, and it was like a 12.5 hour day. We started in the pitch dark, so I got that experience. I got lost by myself on the mountain in the dark, so I had that experience. And I wanted to quit probably like 4 or 5 times and didn't. So I had that experience. Also did St. Helens a couple of weeks before that. Wanted to quit one time because I thought it was too steep. That I literally thought, I was like, I'm on the trail, but this seems way steeper than last year, because we did St. Helens last year together, and like, this doesn't seem right. So just kind of getting, and then realizing, well, Mount St. Helens really isn't even that steep when you do Adams and Rainier. So but I just never been on those kinds of that steepness, what I mean? And there's no trees there to stop. It's just straight down, not straight down. Just like, it's a big slope of snow, it's slippery. And so it just took, and I was luckily with a climbing partner that pushed me, on St. Helens, and she pushed me on Adams, the same way, and helped me kind of get through those. But so yeah, I had more experience this time. And then all of a sudden, like in the last month, my heart rate just really came together. And I started even struggling sometimes to get my heart rate up to like where we think my threshold is. So it all just kind of came together towards the end. Then I did Mount Rainier again.
And I want to talk about your experience this year. I also want to go back to, because you initially were smoking weed in order to keep your anxiety in check. And then you eliminated that from your life. So I presume you had to do something else, right? The anxiety probably didn't go away. In fact, I would imagine for a while it spiked because you didn't know what was going on with your body or your systems. Yeah. So what are some other tools that you rely on day to day or on the mountain in order to keep calm and your anxiety under control?
Working out is one thing, right? So like working out is really a big regulator for your body. So that's definitely important. But outside of that, meditation and breathing. And so, I meditate. I use an app to help, kind of meditate. I'm not great at it all by myself, but I've gotten pretty good. And then breathing exercises, I think for me, might even work better than meditation. And so I use breathing app, Breathworks. That's what it's called, I think. And I use Headspace, I think, for the meditation app, which I don't really like that much, honestly. So I think it's not easy to start. I don't know. I don't find what I want. But Breathworks is good. I really like that. And the box breathing, I think, really helps me. So I do that, and there's some other ones. I also read this book called Breath, literally just Breath, just amazing book, like the importance of breathing through your nose. I mean, like this book is it's amazing. You got to read this book. I can't even, having a loss for words, but
I think I've heard of it. It's not the one where they recommend you tape your mouth.
But they talk about it, but they don't necessarily recommend it, but they talk about that. But it's basically this guy who had a lot of problems with breathing and clogged nose and stuff like that. And he basically went on this quest to like figure it all out. And he just ended up getting like really deep, going to all these different countries. And there's some things that stand out for me, but just like, for example, there's a Native American tribe back in the 1800s that they studied. Because basically what they're saying is like, when we breathe out of our mouths, it actually deforms our face, our facial structure. And they were talking about this Native American tribe that had like perfect piano teeth. Like they had no dentistry, no nothing, perfect, everything. Like the whitest, perfectly fitted teeth, you know what I mean? Just like, and it's because they really practice and they believe in breathing through your nose and the importance of it.
And there's studies that say it shortens your lifespan too if you breathe through your mouth instead of your nose.
And you got to read this book. Yeah, this book just like really opened my eyes. So much so that like my son always had a clogged nose, like forever. And I just thought it was allergies and stuff. And we finally took him in, and it's like deviated septum, got his surgery and everything. Because I told him about this book. He's like, I want to get this fixed, And so we got that resolved, and now he's breathing a lot better. But yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, there's another type of breathing I learned from it. It's nostril breathing. And so like literally your nose has sometimes like more sensitive cells than sometimes like your genital area. Like in some like, and
well, that's true. Because think when you pluck a nose hair, how bad that hurts.
Yeah. And so there's this nostril breathing where you go from side to side, and each side of your nose has a different effect, like the brain on different parts of the brain. And So the nostril breathing, actually, I do that as well. And that helps. And so I know we just got on a long tangent on that
No,
part, but
I love all those tips though. And that's part of what this podcast is about, sharing things that worked for you with other
yeah.
people. So
Read
it's
that
great.
book. Yeah, that book is really
Okay.
is really cool. So yeah, so breathing, and I mean, honestly, I thought I was using pot for its like anti-anxiety benefits. I think it caused me a lot of anxiety, and
Yeah.
so especially over time, it just stops working. And when I think back and I kind of like dig into it, it probably caused a lot of my anxiety.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really good change, really important change for me, and it's been good for me in all aspects of my life, honestly.
And then you went back, we went through training. You had a few injuries along the way, some things you had to work through. Maybe talk about mentally what that was like. Because my recollection is your training was just starting to like ramp up, and, we can only push as fast as your body allows. And so I felt like we were just starting to kind of get into a stride. And then you had a couple of injuries pop up that you had to address.
Yeah, like in the first year, it was my knees. And so it was just kind of basic runner knee, I guess they call it. But I'd never been a runner or done this kind of exercise, this kind of like length of exercise. And so I had to work on my butt and hip strength, basically to kind of even that out. And that really helped. And then this time around, I didn't have any problems with my knees. It was nice. And so, but my ankles were the problem this time. And one of my ankles, was an old injury from when I first it was like August of 2022. I'd really strained it or pulled it, twisted it, whatever, on a hike, and I didn't take care of it. And it just kind of went on to be an issue. And I finally, it's like, all right, I'm going to go get this looked at. And I'd torn a bunch of ligaments in it. And so it was and those ligaments don't usually heal on their own. And so yeah, I decided to have PRP treatment. I was like, all right, I'm going to have this injection, this platelet-rich plasma treatment, and see if it can help heal or make it a little bit better, because the ankles were just really sore and just weak. At least this one, my left one. And sure enough, it helped, but it was like a week. It took, I had to be on a boot for a week-ish, and then I had to like really kind of slowly ramp back in. I think that was in April that I did that, if I remember right. Yeah. And of course, as I was nurturing it back to health, I twist my right one. And sure enough, it has to do worse apparently than my left one was, but it's not, I don't know, for some reason it's not yet causing me issues. I do think I definitely took care of it better than I did when I did my left one. But yeah, even today, like I remember when I was on Adams coming down, it was pretty slushy, and it was like kind of post-holing down into the calf, and like, I think that just, for whatever reason, that motion, kind of the plunge stepping and then getting stuck in the snow just really, really aggravated it. But both ankles, honestly.
And how did you mentally like work through that? I imagine felt like things are just starting to get things together. I'm motivated to do this, and now I have to deal with these injuries.
Yeah, and honestly, I had a couple setbacks from being sick too, in the same way. I freak out.
Step one.
Yeah, step one, I freak out, and then there were probably a couple texts that you got. You were like, God damn, he just needs to calm down. I'm sure, because my wife does the same thing. She's like, oh, Jason, you just need to like relax a little bit. Don't overthink it. It's going to be okay.
I think I'm there to I'm like the shock absorber. Like, I'm there for you to just like get it out, say what you need to say, and then get through all of that. Because it is part of the process, right? The emotion and the worry and the anxiety that comes with that. You've got to get through that and process that in order to get to the point where you can be more tactical about what it really means.
Yeah. And I think dealing with my anxiety, by stopping the pot and then learning other ways of dealing with it, it kind of got to me to a point where I was able to tell myself, this is what you have to deal with. You know what I mean? This is what it is. And so like, there's nothing you can do about it. You can read the Climbers blog all day long, but there's nothing you can do about the conditions on the route. You can worry about being sick all day long, but at the end of the day, it just is what it is. And so I had to get to this mindset. The goal of, because this is my second time on Rainier. So like the goal of, it's like, if I fail again, what does that mean? And so it became so important. I had to get to the point where I could just tell myself, there's one of two outcomes. One, I make it. Two, I learn, but that's it. There's no other third, or fourth. That's the only two outcomes. And so like, if you think about it that way, then there's really no failure. You're either going to succeed at the goal or you're going to learn about it, in some way, or learn about yourself. And so I got to the point where, for the most part, I still would freak out a little bit, but less time freaking out and more time getting to that point of like, and I also became way too reliant on digital stuff. I was looking at I got my ring, I got my watch, I got all these things with data input telling me I'm not good enough, basically, is like what the data seems to be telling me in a lot of places. And I remember my counselor was like, how do you think people made it up right near 40 years ago without watches? I'm like, that's right. They didn't have these things. He's like, just take it off. He's like, when you get to the mountain, you're either going to make it or you're not. He's
Yeah.
like, the walk isn't going to help you or not. It's going to make it worse. Yep. I still wore it, but like I learned to really not pay that much attention to it. It's like, it is what it is. And I'm going to go based on how I feel and not worry about, am I in the range? And so I had to learn about that too, and just kind of letting stuff go more. And of course, when you can learn that in one area, you can apply it in other areas,
Yes.
And I think that's really, this whole thing has such a broader impact on me and my life than just mountaineering or physical fitness. It's like such a broader, so much broader of an impact. Like I just went to my mom's 80th birthday. People that haven't seen me in years are like, you seem so much more laid back. Like, who is the, I have long hair now. I used to not have long hair. I'm like, they're like, who is this person? You just seem like so just relaxed and just, I'm like, that's exactly what I was hoping for.
Awesome. Was that a conscious thing where you sort of identified these things you learned through climbing and intentionally applied them to other parts of your life? Or was it just for you a natural progression?
No, I think it was more natural.
Yeah.
I think it all just kind of started to make sense. And it's like, well, because the goal of, summiting Rainier was bigger than any other goal I really had at the time, professionally or personally or anything. Mm-hmm. And so being able to get to the point with that where I could say, you know what, if I don't make it this time, I'll be okay. And then that can just kind of cascade into other parts, other areas where I've got goals or, yeah.
And how did this year go for you? Let's talk about this year's, because you had some of the spiciest route conditions that I've ever seen on Mount Rainier just a few weeks ago.
It was nuts, and it tested me for sure. I made it. So luckily, I made it. So that was great. But I'll do the short version of it. The route, like you mentioned, it goes up to Gibraltar Rock, which they usually don't ever even go that route. Right. They don't even go that way. It's usually up towards the Emmons, which is off to the east instead of to the west. So it's just because they had this big crack that happened across like a big part of the normal traverse. And so that just wasn't quite safe enough. And then that part collapsed. They had a ladder up it for a long time, and then that fell out. And so I remember reading leading up to it, these people saying, we had to climb a vertical wall that was like 100 feet long. And in my mind, I'm like, that can't be right. I'm like,
I thought the same thing. I was like, no, someone just maybe exaggerating.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my mind.
I couldn't picture, because I was, in my mind, I was like, the way it usually works is you just traverse farther onto the Emmons, and then you go back towards the Disappointment Cleaver. Yep. But that's not what happened this year, because the glacier had deteriorated so dramatically that part of the route wasn't even safe to climb anymore.
Yep. And they couldn't find a safe route over to the Emmons. And so you're going west and towards this rock that's really, really steep. So the first thing in my mind, I'm always listening to the guides because they're always talking, right? And they're on the radios and they're talking to people. And I remember them saying, all right, we got a couple vertical ladders. In my mind, I'm like, oh, sweet. Vertical ladders, like, sweet. I can use both my hands and my feet. I'm like, I can do a vertical ladder all day long. But we had missed a turn. And so there were two routes this day. And I remember them saying, all right, we got to look for this ladder that's laying down, and we take it right there. And then we'll go to this new route. Well, we missed it. And so we come up, and I was the first client in the whole group, the right behind the first guide. And he's like, all right, we're coming up on the ladder. And I'm thinking in my mind, cool. All right, let's climb a ladder. And we get through this like cutout in the snow. It's a horizontal ladder over a crevasse. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I thought, what is this? Like, this isn't even supposed to be here. And it's probably like 20 feet. It's two ladders lashed together on this one. And I just was like, all right, I'm just going to, and I remember you told me, like, you're just climbing and you're tired and you just get to it and you just do it. You just kind of get up to it and you don't really think too much about it. And that's kind of how it went. I just listened to him. He's like, all right, there's a hand line you can grab, kind of lean into it a little bit for tension. My only problem on that was the first piece of wood was like 3 rungs out, so like I was like, I'm not trying to do my first step on the rungs with crampons. I'm going to step way out. So I just took a big step, which was a little bit uncomfortable, but got across that. And then I see the vertical ladder and I'm like, okay, cool. There it is. And it's pitch black. So you can't see anything that's above the ladder. You can see the ladder. So in my mind, I'm like, cool, there's a ladder, and you get off the ladder and you're walking on something, because I'm like, ladders go up to things that you walk on. And so I remember our guide went up first and I'm following him up. And first my rope gets caught on a picket. So I have to climb back down. I got to undo it, get back on the ladder. And I get to the top of the ladder. I look up and there's nothing but wall. And I'm like, Tyler, how do I get off this ladder? Yep. There's a wall of rock and like some snow and ice. I'm like, how do I get off this ladder? The people behind me are just kind of chuckling, He's like, start climbing. I'm like, what? And so he's like, there's a hand line with knots tied into it. He's like, grab a knot. And there were actually 2 hand lines, one if you had an ascender, which was just a straight line, and then one with knots if you didn't have an ascender. And of course, we didn't have those. And so, and inside, I'm freaking out. I'm completely freaking out, thinking this isn't safe. We're not even supposed to be here. This is a guided trip. This is supposed to be a hard hike. I'm not supposed to be doing technical ice climbing right now. And sure enough, I just like, all right, this is not the time to back out,
Right.
And so I start just with my right hand, grabbing the knots, and I don't know what to do with my left hand. He's like, use your ice axe. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, that's probably what it's here for. So I like stick the ice axe in and use that, and then grab a next knot and stick the ice axe. So and my helmet's kind of down, so I can't quite see how far he is. And I'm trying to look up and see, and then I get stuck again. My rope gets stuck, and I think it's the guy behind me not coming up fast enough, but I look behind, he's right there. But my rope had got down and got caught in other ropes. And so I had to go down a little bit more and kind of undo it. But finally got to the top of that thing. And I just was like, hey, whoa, like, are you even supposed to take us on this, And then B, just like the sense of accomplishment at that point, I had this adrenaline rush. I was like, let's run up this rest of this mountain. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Let's go. I felt so strong and just so like, holy shit, I just crossed a crevasse ladder, which I was freaked out about. And I just literally climbed a wall, which I was not prepared to do.
So what I firmly believe is that we're all so much stronger and more capable than we ever realize we are. And obviously you had the skill and the tenacity and the calmness and the presence of mind to get through those situations, to do them well. Do you think, looking back to 2023, you could have done it then?
No
way.
No. I would have just been the experiences that I had leading up, because like the first time I did St. Helens was with you. So I felt super, I was like, you're going to keep me out of harm's way. And you know this mountain. And it's not even really that hard of one, honestly, like when you really look back on it. But doing Adams basically by myself, because it was with me and two people that, are not mountain
like you, just people like you.
Just like recreational, climbers, and being by myself on that mountain and getting it done and feeling confident and guiding it for like a lot of it, like, let's go this way. Let's, I did get, there was one area that was a little spicy on Adams that I got a little freaked out about. And we got lost on the way down. I had to kind of trailblaze and come back to a trail. And so those experiences leading up to it. And then I'd gone backpacking and camping with a friend out in the freezing cold on Mount Baker in February. So I just kind of built up more like, okay, I can do this. I can sleep in 15-degree weather, and I didn't freeze, and I can climb at night for 5 hours and nothing bad happened. And so it's just like, those confidence boosters also helped. And those are some of the experiences I think that I needed to have just for myself, to be able to like look at that situation. And don't get me wrong, I was freaking out on that wall. Like I was for sure, like I had to, I obviously got up it, but I was, for the first third, I was freaking out. And then I was like, okay, I'm on this thing. It's happening, like I'm not, there's nothing. So now I just got to like deal with it, and just like breathe through it and just know like it's going to be fine. I just keep going. And so that's, but I did freak out probably the first third of it. And I remember I told the guy and I was yelling up at him. I was like, and I love him. But I was like, I'm stuck. I don't know what he's like. I don't know. I made it fine. Like, well, yeah, you were first and you were a guide. Like, of course you did. But he's just trying to, like get me to, focus.
And to realize you could do it. You were capable of doing it.
Yeah. He's like, I just did it fine. So like, there's nothing blocking you from doing this.
Right.
And so yeah, it was,
well, congrats.
It was a great experience.
It's always interesting to me how sometimes the thing that we worry about the most is exactly what we get. Right. The thing that we're like, and I think that happens because we're capable all along of overcoming it. We just don't realize it. And sometimes you need that very in your face, demonstrative example to prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. You know what I mean? Like I for sure got my money's worth, on this trip. I got a little tiny bit of technical climbing experience in. And honestly, on the way down, we went the other route and it was also pretty crazy too. And so I got, experience with things that had everything just gone perfectly and it would have been like a normal hike earlier in the season or something, that I wouldn't have had those experiences and I wouldn't have felt as accomplished as I did. One of our guides had done this 150 times. He's like, this is the most technical route I've had to guide, on this mountain. And so that a little bit of you plays it in your mind. Like he says that to everybody, like he says every girl's
not this
crazy.
Year. Yeah.
Yeah. But hearing it from several people, I'm like, no, this is a pretty crazy route.
Legit.
Yeah. And so now, and then like I told you when I got done, I was like, man, I'm hooked, feeling and having got it done. And yeah, it was great.
So what does that mean for you? And sometimes I get annoyed when people ask me this question, so you can defer it. Do
No.
you like, what experiences are you looking for from the next mountains that you climb? Or how do you, I guess there's two ways to think about it. You can think about it like tactically. I want to get better at ice climbing, for example. You can
Yeah.
also think about it as this is how I want to grow and evolve personally. These are the skills that I want and the confidence I want to build. So what
Yeah.
things do you consider after just summiting Rainier as you're considering your next climb?
Yeah. So for me, I think the next step isn't like bigger and taller necessarily. Like for
Mm-hmm.
me, the next step is becoming self-sufficient in the mountains. And
Mm-hmm.
so being able to grab a couple buddies and go do Rainier or go do Baker probably first without being guided. And so because for me, like I do learning about it. So there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
It's like when you're on the mountain school with these guided, you're not learning really much. You're not learning how to be self-sufficient. You still need guides. So like if
Mm-hmm.
somebody falls in a crevasse, you know how to stop yourself, but you don't know how to get out of it. So like you need the guide. And just like tying the rope knots and the different knots and like the
Yep.
spacing and like so that's what I want to do next. And just so I can be, like self-sufficient and participate or even at some point maybe lead, just
Mm-hmm.
me and a couple other people on some of these things and doing some of the assessment, you know what I mean? Like the risk assessment and just pushing, and kind of pushing myself in learning more about it. And because I do love, like I mentioned, I love the learning piece. And I think getting to know more gear, and how to use that
Always
stuff.
more gear.
Yeah. Yep. I love the gear part of this whole thing. In fact, the guide was like, "You have like all the best gear." Like when they were going through my stuff, he's like, "Wow, you
They're
basically
probably
read all."
envious.
Yeah, he was. It's like this is what we would all have if we had enough money.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad I made the right choices, and it does make a difference. Honestly, the gear does make a difference, but. So yeah, that's kind of my next thing. It's because I think that's a confidence builder. So like if I
Yeah.
were able to go back and go back and do Rainier, but with 3 other people instead of with a
Mm-hmm.
guide, making some of those decisions on our own as a group. So yeah, I think that's probably what's next.
And we're fortunate that, we live in a place where you have such ready access to all of those things. We have so many, we get sort of obsessed on Rainier and Baker and Shuckson in the Pacific Northwest, but there's a lot of other peaks that are equally challenging, equally as fun, usually more remote, but where
Yeah.
you can build those skills and test yourself a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think, my first goal is probably just do all the 5 volcanoes in Washington. And so,
Yep.
and maybe in a season, so
Yep.
maybe that next year is because I still have Baker and Glacier Peak left to do. And so yeah, that could be like a next kind of goal and to be able to do those on my own. And so yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to next.
Well, one sort of business related question. So you have your own company, you run your own company. What do you share your experience as a mountaineer and what you've learned openly with the clients that you support, or what sort of intersection is there for you, if any?
Yeah, my lines are really blurred. I post a lot on LinkedIn. So I have a pretty big LinkedIn following, which just sounds funny to say, and it's big because I'm very just authentic in myself. And so I share personal, in fact, leading up to these climbs, I talk about it and I post some of my training stuff and I relate it to like how it relates to, challenges that we have in business. And a lot of them are very, very aligned, And so I share those things and people really like, they like getting out of the normal, like, this is how to do B2B marketing and sales, and just like, and seeing, somebody can be, and a lot of people, that I inspire people through those things too. They look at it and it's like, wow, Jason's 47 and he's climbing Mount Rainier and he has a full-time job and he's,
And 2
dedicated
kids
to his job and he can do it still.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have said that's really inspiring they'll private message me on the side and just say, man, I just love these posts. And so, yeah. And I talked to one of my clients was so excited for me. He's like, you got to post everything on, and several of my clients were following me on my InReach.
Awesome.
Several of my clients sent me messages when I was on the mountain of encouragement through my InReach. So they were all in.
I think that's great. Nice. And I think, inspiration is a word we hear a lot of. And for me, that means just showing other people what's possible.
Yeah.
And you can't do that, I learned, because my comfort zone is not being out there and expressing private parts of my life. But what I've learned is that people can't relate to you unless they see those vulnerable, more private things that you're going through or learning or enduring. And then they see themselves in you and they see what's possible. And then that motivates them to try something more challenging. And hopefully the ball just keeps rolling.
Yeah, no, I've had several people come and just tell me and they've told me, what they've started. One person was even like, I've lost 30 pounds. I just
Ah,
like really got inspired by what you were doing. I was like, I got to get off my butt and,
that's great.
do more stuff. And so, yeah, it's a nice, it helps. And that's not why I do it. You know what I mean? But it definitely is a nice added benefit.
I
Yeah.
agree. Well, thank you for doing it. Thank you for sharing everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you for, getting me there. You were definitely a humongous part of
Well,
that
thanks.
success. And I really appreciate it.
I feel like I just make suggestions. You guys have to do the work. But anything else you want to share with listeners before we wrap up for today?
I don't know. I mean, I think, just the main thing for me is just, I think like continuous self-improvement, and that's what I've always tried to be that way, but I don't think I was really authentically that way until the last couple of years, doing a lot of work on myself mentally, physically, and I'm in the best physical shape of my life at 47 and the best mental shape of my life at 47. And so it's like, it doesn't matter when you do it, and I'm not old. I'm not saying I'm old, but like, in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, 50s, 60s, it's not too late to really focus on yourself, and you think about whatever your meaning of life is, it's like, I think I don't want to be on my deathbed or whatever, down the road and looking back and having regrets that I didn't, who knows, this is like one life to live. We have no idea what's going on after this. So I want to make the absolute most of it. And I want that to be healthy. I want to be happy. I want to low stress. I want to, just have the best shot at it as possible. And I think that's exploring yourself and exploring things that you're afraid of. I've a fear of heights, you know what I mean? And I'm up there on mountains, and so like really exploring these and kind of pushing the boundaries of what you think, like you said, of what you think you're capable of, and proving to yourself that you're capable of so much more, I think is a really big, important part of life.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for being an example of how to do that. It's really been fun, not just coaching you, but watching you sort of evolve and learn and matriculate, and also applying what you've learned in the mountains to other parts of your life in a positive way. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for being on. It's great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thanks.